Okay, this is a video for the graphic organizer toolkit here, how to make tables and graphs. Please feel free to pause this video at any time in order to write some things down if you need to. You should be recording all of the things that I write down here. So the first thing that you notice here talks about tables. Always identify your variables. So your X is going to be your independent variable, and your Y is going to be your dependent variable. All right, so a table that goes horizontally like this, it will be X and Y. If you have a table that's set up more like a T-chart, it will usually be X and Y like that. So in this case, I'm gonna give you some information and we're gonna use that in order to follow along with everything we need here. So I'm gonna tell you that our independent variable is time. And in this case, we are recording time in hours. And our dependent variable is pages read. Okay, so when time starts, 12 pages has already been read. After 1 hour, 32 pages have been read. After 2 hours, 52 pages has been read. After 3 hours, 72 pages have been read. After 4 hours, 92 pages has been read. And after 7 hours, 152 pages have been read. You might notice here that this did not go in the same pattern that the rest of these numbers did. So please make sure you keep an eye out for that. Watch how the X is changing, because that will make a difference. Okay, so let's go ahead and review tails so that you can write a graph with this information using this. You might have heard before O-tails to, of course, include the origin here, 0, 0. Okay, so T stands for title. You're going to want that title to describe your graph. So in this case, you might use the description of pages read over time. Okay, next, reminder, if you need to pause, feel free to do so, would be your axes. You want to label both your X and Y. Remember, X is the horizontal and Y is the vertical. So I'm going to go ahead and label those in my graph as well. I stands for intervals. And by that, I mean you must always go by the same amounts. Equal spacing or skip counting here. On the X, okay? So for example, here our time goes from 0 to 7. Well, I have a lot of space here. And if I just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's a little squished in there. So I'm gonna go by a little more. And that squishness has to do with our S. We'll talk about that there. So I'm going to represent every 2 blocks is worth 1. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that spreads it out more. And now each block is worth a half. And you can see that I said that 2 blocks was worth 1 here. So 2 blocks is worth 1 all the way throughout. You have to go by the same amount each time here. All right, now if we look at our pages read, that's our next one actually. Let's go into labels. Okay, L stands for labels. And don't forget, so you're going to label your axes and don't forget to include units. So on our X, this is our time, and remember, our time is being measured in hours. It's always helpful to have your variables already identified in order to make this graph go smoothly. So let me add in a little arrow here, and I'll add in that this is time in hours, and that our Y here is number of pages read. So our units are in numbers, and that's our label. So let's go ahead and finish off this scale. S stands for the scale or the spacing. You want to make sure you use the given space. And that is why we didn't squish all 7 of these in this little graph, but we went and used the appropriate space there. Now, for the Y variable, or dependent variable, pages written has to go all the way up to 152. So I know I can't count by ones. I know that's not going to work. I know maybe we could try 5s. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. I'm only at 50 and already halfway through, so that's not going to work. Let's try by 10s. I actually counted out ahead of time, and 10s will work. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So you can see that even though I wrote from 10 to 50, that each block is still worth 10. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. I don't have to write it in every time, but I have to represent it the same. So that's 60, 70, 80, 90. That's 100, 110, 120, 130, 140. That's 150. And we can stop at 160 because our maximum is 152. Now, the only reason I'm not writing these little ones in between is because I don't have enough space. So if you have space, please feel free to include them. It might make it easier to graph. So now I'm going to start plotting these points. This is our X variable, independent, our time, and our dependent Y variable. So I'm going to go over to 0 on the X and then up to 12. So my first point is going to be a little bit over the 10. Now I'm going to go over to 1 and up to, that's 32, a little bit above the 30. Over to 2 and up to 52. Over to 3 and up to 72, over to 4 and up to 92. Good, I'm still good because that's my 100 marker. Then I'm going to go over to 7. So that's 4, 5, 6, 7, and then up to, that's 100, 10, 20, 30, 40. That's 150, so it's just above 150 there. Beautiful. I'm not going to draw this line in pen because I would probably mess it up, but you can see here that you should have a linear straight line forming, and that's coming from the fact that this is changing at a constant rate, even though this is all plus 20 and then this goes plus 60, the rate is 20 pages for every hour. And that, if we had extended this out to include 5 and 6, would be a total increase of 60 there. So what I want you to do now is to spend some time looking at the example that we gave and you completing an example here. You have to decide the intervals and the spacing. You have to decide the dependent and independent variable, which is going to go on the X versus the Y. And of course, don't forget to include your title as well.